Good afternoon to you. 306 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Delano Squires joins us at 3:30. Always appreciate our conversations. We'll talk to him. He's with the Heritage Foundation about what this Harvard resignation means for the country. Something very big is happening. The left can sense it, and they are furious. Delano Squires will discuss. Julio Rosas is here at 4 o'clock. He was with those Republicans on the border yesterday. We'll get an update from him on what he saw and heard. Dr. Carol Swain joins us at 4:30 today, a conversation you don't want to miss. She had her work stolen by the president of Harvard. We'll get a reaction to all of the latest there. And Jason Miyares, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, is here with us today at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Back in the winter of 1777, George Washington took all of the disparate groups that made up the Continental Army and brought them together at Valley Forge, a staging ground outside of Philadelphia, the American capital at the time that had been overtaken by the British. And they had a rough winter there. They built up an encampment. They kind of raised the woods around them. They put log cabins up. They brought together men of all different backgrounds, races, creeds to ride out that winter and to strengthen up and to train and to ultimately win the War of Independence, to fight back against an invading force, the British, and to declare the United States, of course, completely independent. So that's what George Washington and the men that were there did back then, and women, as a matter of fact. There were women and children there as well. In the winter of 1777 and 1778. This week, Joe Biden plans on disgracing the memory of all of those people. He was originally supposed to go Saturday, the end of the week. This is supposed to be the first campaign event of the year for him, and you can be sure it would be a part of a very limited number of public campaign events that he will do. They are not interested in putting Joe Biden out in public. But because there will be some snow, potentially, there will be inclement weather expected Saturday, the Biden campaign has decided to reschedule the high holy day of the left, January 6th, to tomorrow, January 5th. Because just as George Orwell has written about, the numbers really don't matter. They can change them at any given time. So tomorrow is January 6th, regardless of what your calendar says. And Joe Biden will be celebrating it in the way that you might expect, which is to sow division and contempt for your fellow man. That's the whole game. That's what this campaign is going to be. If you thought things were crazy before, just wait until you see what this Biden campaign really looks like going into November. This will be one of the darkest presidential campaigns, certainly that any of us will have seen in our lifetimes, but perhaps in all of American history. This is going to be a very dark affair. The Associated Press today is even reporting on it and noting that he's not running on a positive vision, not running on something joyful, not a happy-go-lucky report card of his efforts as president of the United States, but instead representing a very dark vision as he heads to Pennsylvania this weekend. Well, technically tomorrow. So that's the plan. And it's obvious why. It's obvious why, isn't it? He doesn't have a good message to share. It's not like the economy's actually improved, despite his lies about that subject. Bidenomics has not been a stirring success. People are in more credit card debt than they've ever been in, well over $1 trillion. Interest rates are staggeringly high to the point that people are either locked in homes or can't afford new ones. Yeah, it is wild, actually, but in an unfortunate way, what's going on. The drug epidemic has never been worse. The homicides are out of control. D.C. just experienced its single worst homicide count in the entire century. Set a record for deaths, homicides, this past year. A lot of stories like that playing out across the country. Violence has been aided and enabled by all of the people, all these prosecutors who are allowing it. They're not prosecuting, so we have to come up with a different word for that. The border's wide open. And the Biden administration wants to play pretend that it's not. So, yeah, no, there's not a lot of good stories to tell. In fact, very few stories to tell that are good. None of them involve the Biden administration. If it's a good story, it doesn't involve the Biden administration. So instead, he's going to run on fear. That's what he's going to do. And they're freaking out. The Biden people are freaking out about losing some of their core constituencies. The left has operated now for decades under the assumption that non-white people were going to be their path to permanent power. This is all that whole replacement theory stuff that they came up with. They thought demographic change was going to be a boon to them in the long run. It's going to be great. Fewer white people means more power for us. This is the way the left operates. Of course, it's the entire history of the Democrat Party operating through the lens of racism and bigotry and how it can enable them and give them power. But that's not the case. You're looking at the numbers now. Hispanic Americans are more likely to vote for Republican candidates than they are Democrats. So fail. That was a fail. That didn't work out. And this week, you get another exclamation point on something that has been happening and has been showing up in survey data over and over and over again. But this week, the USA Today poll comes out, and it finds that black Americans are abandoning Biden by numbers that are intolerable to Democrat strategists, because they are very dependent on black voters to get them over the finish line in any one of these races. That's just the truth. And does that mean that all of these black voters are abandoning Biden and going to vote for Trump? No, that is not what that means. It is not. Although, of course, for the well-being of their families, they should. But what we are seeing is a lot of black voters are saying, I'm going with the third party, or I'm not voting at all. Biden has not been good for me. And so this is scaring the White House. So what is the White House doing? What are the people around Biden doing? They want to scare black voters into submission. This is always the strat. Biden's used it his entire political career. Remember what he said about Mitt Romney? You remember that? Biden stood on a campaign stage and he said that Mitt Romney would, quote, put y'all back in chains. He said to a black audience. He said that Mitt Romney would be a slaver should he become president of the United States. This is the playbook. So this weekend, on Friday and then subsequently on Monday, it's scheduled as of now, weather allowing, Biden is set to give a series of speeches that are designed to divide the country and trying to scare people, especially black voters, into submission to push him over the finish line again. And I told you yesterday, we had these historians who went to the White House yesterday. And guess what? Guess who was right? John Meacham was there yesterday. I said before we even knew the names, the White House was like, well, we can't tell you who was here. Why can't you tell us? It was John Meacham, this presidential historian character. Now, Meacham is a guy who's written a bunch of these speeches for Biden, including the blood red speech that he gave during the midterms in 2022 from Independence Hall. So what I'm expecting this week is a redux of that. We're going to get the same thing from Biden, just in a different year, and with him less capable of reading the teleprompter than he was before. Here's what the rage speech sounded like back in 2022.
I ran for president because I believe we're in a battle for the soul of this nation. I still believe that to be true. I believe the soul is the breath, the life, and the essence of who we are. The soul is what makes us us.
Yeah, makes us us. Now, again, as I said, Meacham was reported to have written the speech at the time. And the guy's been doing this for years now. He's been writing all these speeches because as the historian, of course, he wants his own place in history. He wants to be a part of this. I wrote for the president. I'm the guy. So he's not really an historian. He's like he's a part of the White House staff, but we pretend differently. And through the years, he's gone on television and he's praised Biden speeches that he wrote. Here he is back in 2020, November of 2020, talking to NBC's Brian Williams. This is at the time he was MSNBC's Brian Williams. Brian had been fired by NBC and shuffled off to MSNBC by this point. And Meacham is talking about how great the speech is that Biden just gave.
I am not the historian you are, and I certainly don't have the Pulitzer on my shelf that you do. Do you concur that that is the way we are used to hearing from our presidents?
Absolutely. Tonight marks the entire election results, mark a renewal of an American conversation where we're struggling imperfectly to realize the full implications of the Jeffersonian promise of equality. That has taken us too long. Our work has been bloody and tragic and painful and difficult, and Lord knows it is unfinished.
All right, this goes on and on. It's tedious, but the point is he's sitting there going, this is, absolutely. What you just heard Biden talk about. And meanwhile, Biden didn't say any of that. Meacham said it. It was Meacham's words, and he didn't even disclose it to MSNBC's audience, obviously. And nobody there seemed to care. They weren't upset about that. And so, in the lead up to the prior speech, the Philly speech, the one that Biden gave, two Marines standing on either side of him, blood red lighting behind him. John Meacham was one of the presidential historians he met with. And, of course, who helped him write it. And at the time, the Washington Post reported on that, how they were all a part of helping to craft this message. And it's funny because if you go back in time, what you discover is that NPR reacted to this visit by these historians with Biden ahead of that Philadelphia speech. And the only thing they were upset about was that all of the historians were white. I'm not kidding at all. That's literally the criticism. NPR put out a piece that were like, they said the historians advised the president. The problem, the scholars were all white. That's what the NPR said. So the Biden people have changed course since then. Yesterday, there were also black scholars who were present at the White House in order to placate NPR, so they're not freaking out this time. Black scholars are there now. But John Meacham was there. And if you're looking for a preview of what this speech is going to be like tomorrow, well, Biden's campaign has just released the first ad of 2024. They're going to spend $500,000 on this, put in a couple television markets, and they want you to hear just how awful our country is right now. That's Biden's campaign. Our country sucks.
I've made the preservation of American democracy the central issue of my presidency.
Okay, first of all, they had their choice of every word Biden has ever uttered when they put this ad together. And that was the best they could come up with. He's incoherent from the first second of the ad.
I've made the preservation of American democracy the central issue of my presidency. I believe in free and fair elections and the right to vote fairly and have your vote counted. There's something dangerous happening in America.
Isn't this rich? So his party right now is blocking any number of people from ballots all across the country. They're preventing voters from having the choice. They're actively working in at least two states, more, certainly they're actively doing it, but in two states so far, Colorado and Maine, they've booted Donald Trump off of the ballot to prevent voters from having a choice. You heard Joy Behar say it yesterday on The View. And let the voters decide? No, she said. She said without any, it wasn't a joke. She truly meant it. She said that would be awful, that if voters got to decide who became president of the United States. Can't happen. The Democrats have kept all of Biden's political opponents off the primary ballots. If you want to vote for Congressman Dean Phillips, sorry, you're out of luck. It's not happening because the DNC, the Democrats, have blockaded the ballots all across the country to prevent alternatives from appearing. Robert F. Kennedy found this out the hard way as he was trying to run. It's obvious. It's obvious what's going on. They do not want voters to have choices. They're literally rigging ballots right now. And here you have Biden saying, "Oh, it's democracy."
There's something dangerous happening in America. There's an extremist movement that does not share the basic beliefs in our democracy.
Yes, I'm aware of it. It's in the White House now.
All of us are being asked right now, what will we do to maintain our democracy? History's watching. The world is watching.
The answer to that question, in his view, is to imprison his political opponents and to remove them from the ballot.
Most important, our children and grandchildren will hold us responsible.
This is not the party of children and grandchildren. They're wrecking the children we have.
The Vice President and I have supported voting rights since day one of this administration.
What are voting rights? I support voting rights. Corey supports voting rights. Corey's got a vote. Big fan of voting rights.
And I ask every American to join me in this cause. America is still a place of possibilities where the power resides with we, the people. That's our soul. We are the United States of America.
United?
There is nothing beyond our capacity when we act together. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Yeah, so tomorrow, a wild speech expected out of Joe Biden. I will say, just by way of prediction, my guess is that the White House has learned that they probably shouldn't bathe the backdrop in Soviet red blood lighting, right? Do you think maybe they've learned that lesson? Who knows? Maybe they don't care. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're going to double down on that. Perhaps they won't have the Marines standing right next to Biden as he makes these remarks tomorrow. Now, it's supposed to be a campaign event, so that should exclude the United States Marine Corps from being used in that way in the first place. But it hasn't stopped the Biden administration in the past from politically manipulating the troops and using them in ways that are abhorrent. So we'll see. I've got more updates on Biden's schedule coming up in the next few days.
The Vice President and I have supported voting rights since day one of this administration.
Voting rights. They've been supporting voting rights, they say. That's news to us. I didn't realize they were such supporters of the voters. Hey, the other piece here that I want to flash you back on is that a good expression? Flash you back? To bring you back in time for is after he gave that blood red speech in Philadelphia, and actually, well, even before that, there was a blogger and attorney by the name of Ann Althouse. She voted for Obama, just so in case you're wondering, who described Biden's speeches as fascistic. These speeches where he demonizes the rest of the country. Take a listen to this.
I want to get into this idea of the soul of America and Biden's theme to rebuild the soul of America and Meacham's book title, The Soul of America.
Meacham.
What do you think of the idea that a country has a soul? The soul of America. I like to think that individual human beings have a soul. And when I hear of this composite soul of an entire country, I'm skeptical. I mean, that's what makes me think of fascism. For all the times that Trump has been called a fascist, to me, this soul of America business, when it doesn't sound like just sheer bilge or obvious propaganda, it has a fascistic quality to it, especially if you're not acknowledging the soul of individual people. And so often from the Democratic side, I get the sense that they view their opponents as being soulless, as not having a soul. And I feel that they're also antagonistic to individualism. Everyone needs to think the same thing, and people should be canceled if
Yeah, she's picking it up, isn't she? She's picking up what he's laying down to the extent that he's laying down anything. Biden is also set to give a speech on Monday at the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, the scene of that horrific shooting years ago now, because, once again, he's trying to scare black voters into submission. He doesn't have a positive vision to run on. Coming up, Delano Squires joins us. We'll ask him some questions about this and so much more. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Julio Rosas joins us at 4 o'clock with an update from our southern border. He was there with those congressmen who were visiting it yesterday to witness the chaos. Dr. Carol Swain is here at 4:30, a woman who had her work stolen by the outgoing president of Harvard. And Jason Miyares will be with us, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia, at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yes, the news this week that Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, is resigning that post, although she will stay on at Harvard as a professor and will continue to make about $1 million a year, so not much of a punishment. She got a title removed. She wrote an op-ed yesterday for the New York Times, just published as our program was ending yesterday. And in it, she referenced herself over 50 times in the form of I, me, and my, which is a habit, of course, on the left. And she also predictably blamed race as the reason that she was leaving that post. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe she's the one who resigned, but she said that it was racism that led to her being ejected. For more on this topic and what's going on in the country right now, I want to bring in a very intelligent guest here. Delano Squires is a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and he joins us now. Delano, good to have you back with us. Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year to you too, Vince.
This is a wild one, isn't it? Give me sort of your top line impressions of what's actually happening here.
I think what's happening here is that Claudine Gay is being hoisted on her own petard, so to borrow a phrase, I think, from Shakespeare. So, I mean, the entire sort of DEI and equity industrial complex bureaucracy rests or has power given the belief that people can be bullied out of their positions based on sins that either they or their forebears have committed in the past. So when all these, accusations of plagiarism popped up, I think that was the lever that was needed to root her out of her position. Obviously, her performances in front of Congress related to anti-Semitism on campus didn't do her any favors. But I think the people who believe that the words and actions that people, sort of have 20, 30 years in the past should be used to justify their ouster from positions today, never assume that those weapons of warfare would be turned back on them.
Yeah.
So I think she's getting a taste of her own medicine.
Well, it also seems like the DEI regime has been exposed as nothing more than a cheat code for mediocre people to skip past doing the hard work of becoming impressive.
And I think there's certainly something to be said for that. Now, I will be honest. I don't know what goes into the search for a college president. I don't know if most college presidents have a long publishing record. I would hope that if they do have a publishing record, that the words that they have written are their own and their ideas are their own. But it's possible that you can get an executive from business or the military or somewhere else who could function as a good college president. I think in as much as this is being made about affirmative action and DEI, what Claudine Gay represents to me is someone who will be completely loyal to the regime. So when she was announcing back in 2020, the creation of, a new Harvard's sort of anti-racism pledge, that to me is the type of thing that people will get rewarded for. So I do think, is there something to be said, that much was made of her being the first Black woman to be president of Harvard? Of course there is. Of course there is. But the thing is, the left makes these things sort of the most important thing that people should know about this candidate.
Yes.
It's not, she published this research, she raised this amount of money, she's advanced our thinking in this area of scholarship. It's always, she's the first Black woman or insert other identity category.
Yep.
And I think people are starting to get tired of that.
Well, also in my view, I think that her skin color actually protected her from this outcome for a bit because, it was a month ago. It was the beginning of December that Liz McGill, the president of the University of Pennsylvania, was ousted for her performance in the very same congressional hearing as Claudine Gay. But Claudine Gay kind of stretched on for a while at Harvard. So in some ways, like the left is representing this as, they went after her because she was a Black woman. My sense is she was kind of protected by her identity.
This is what I call the complexion for deflection. And what I've noticed is that the very people who say, you should vote for me or have me in this position because I belong to this particular demographic group. Let's say I'm Black and I'm female, or I'm gay and I'm trans. What they do is that they ascend to these positions and then use those very identity markers as a shield against criticism. You see this over and over again, particularly with public officials. I'm thinking of, Lori Lightfoot, former mayor of Chicago, who said, the criticism that she got was because she's a gay Black woman. And they do this, they use identity as both a sword and a shield. And in fact, the unintended consequence of this is that voters or people, whether it's voters or just everyday citizens who are in the public square, will say the only people who can truly be criticized without fear of them weaponizing their identity against us are straight white men. The left doesn't see this as the natural reaction to what they're doing. But if every time you either vote for a woman and she's in office and you criticize her, she says it's sexism. You vote for someone who's part of the LGBTQ community and they say it's homophobia. You vote for someone who's Black and they say it's racism. Then the only people left to vote for without that fear are people who you claim come from the dominant identity category.
Right. And this explains, I think, a lot of the left's open, naked anti-Semitism. They're operating under the assumption that the people that are attacking, Jewish people, are by and large just like straight white people. So how could I be wrong by attacking them?
Right, and this is the idiocy of sort of superficial identity politics, right? And people, they are presented with much more complex examples than they may have realized. So the notion that all Jews are white and therefore can be attacked in the ways that are, I guess, have become normal on college campuses for other white students is not really holding up the way that they thought it would, because now donors are starting to get involved and say, we don't stand for that. But I will say this, it should make people question, why haven't some of these donors, regardless of their background, spoken up to this point and say, look, the sort of anti-white ideology that's been on college campuses wasn't good, and neither was the notion that if you believe in biology, right, and that there are males and females and switching isn't allowed, that you're some sort of transphobic bigot, and that is violence against queer students. So there's a lot here to be unearthed.
Yeah, you don't become a billionaire
beyond Claudine Gay.
You don't become a billionaire by having no idea how your money's being spent. Right? I mean, these guys are making these massive contributions, these massive endowments to these institutions. And for years, these institutions have been fomenting and spreading poison. And now all of a sudden, a bunch of these donors are like, I can't believe they're spreading poison. Oh, stop it. You knew this was happening.
Exactly.
It's crazy. All right. So meanwhile, I do wonder if there's going to be any impact broadly on higher education here. As I noted, Claudine Gay is not in any meaningful way being punished. She's staying at the school. She's making $1 million a year. Still. At Harvard, I see a number of stories coming out right now. The Wall Street Journal says that one Harvard physicist reported that the Gay administration, that under Claudine Gay, that Harvard had become a, quote, police organization, that it was more interested in policing political speech than it was in free expression, and it became paralyzing to the administration, to the staff that were there. Additionally, the former head of Harvard Medical School has a new piece out today in the Harvard Crimson, the on-campus paper, saying that the corporation, which is the board that runs Harvard, needs to restore free speech to Harvard now, that this is a perfect opportunity to bring back free speech. Pretty wild to see these guys openly expressing that they feel like there is no free speech on this big campus.
Right, and conservatives have been saying this for decades, that the left talks about diversity, but what they really mean is they want people who look different but all think the same. And until someone like, a Glenn Lowry or John McWhorter or a Charles Murray can go to Harvard and engage in a controversial topic, without fear of the heckler's veto, or Riley Gaines or Matt Walsh, then it's clear to me that these universities are not really committed to free speech, free thought, and free inquiry. They are committed to ideological conformity, and that is crystal clear. And what they're doing is they are undermining their legitimacy in the public square with far more effectiveness than any sort of anti-intellectual crusader ever could. What Harvard and the Ivies are doing to academia is the same thing that Randy Weingarten did to the sort of the public image of K through 12 education. Right? She to me is the most effective school choice advocate in the country, because by showing her sort of ideological commitments that have nothing to do with child outcomes, student outcomes, it pushes parents to say, if this is the type of person who's running one of the largest teachers unions in the country, I need to get my kids out of public education. And I think the Ivy Leagues are doing the same thing as it relates to higher ed.
Yeah, applications for early admission to Harvard fell 17% last year in the midst of the ongoing illiberal attitudes they have going on that campus. So you're right, this could be an eye-opening experience for a lot of Americans. I want to shift gears to Joe Biden with you real quick, Delano Squires, while we have the chance, because there was a USA Today poll out earlier this week indicating that black voters are drifting away from Joe Biden. They're not necessarily voting for Trump, but a lot are interested in voting for a third-party candidate. Additionally, it looks like Biden is going to spend his first two campaign events trying to scare black voters back into submission, casting his political opponent, Donald Trump, as some sort of white supremacist threat. In fact, he'll be giving a speech on Monday at the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. That was the site of a white supremacist murder in 2015. He's placing a great emphasis on this because it seems obvious to me he wants to, again, scare those voters into showing up for him. What do you make of this?
I think his choices in terms of campaigning and what you laid out just now are a perfect example of what I call the Selma syndrome. And I've written about how progressives use the Selma syndrome to make Democrat the new black. And when I talk about the Selma syndrome, what I'm doing is my argument is that the left has weaponized America's real history on race. I'm not denying that our history at times has been ugly and bloody, and they have fused it to their politics in such a way to tell or to message to black voters that if you don't vote for us, you're going to end up black on the plantation, back in Jim Crow. And for them, Selma, Alabama is always frozen in time in black and white. It's not a real place. It's not a real city. It's a way to signal to black voters, if you don't vote for us, bad things are going to happen. So I'm not surprised by any of this. This is what they do. This is part of the left's desire to sort of enforce that Stockholm syndrome on black voters. To say your well-being is tied to our ability to maintain office, and Joe Biden sort of plays this tune as well as or better than most.
Yeah, but I mean, as you point out, as we talk about like Selma, the events of 1965, the horrors that were perpetrated on black Americans were done at the hands of Democrats. It was so the idea that Democrats are using this as like evidence that they're the party worth, investing your vote in is it's the peak of brazen political stunts.
Right. Now they will say, oh, the party switched, Southern strategy, so on and so forth. But the truth is, again, this has been their play for a number of years, and this is why they have such hatred and antipathy towards black conservatives, because anyone who's right of center that questions the narrative, they have to castigate as a race traitor or a sellout in order to sort of keep their voters where they are. So it's unfortunate. I think there are things that politicians across the board should be talking about: school choice, the importance of family, safe streets, so on and so forth. But they would rather go with these scare tactics. Yeah,
they're still the party of racial bigotry. So show me the evidence that there was a switch. Thank you very much, Delano Squires. I really appreciate your time today, as always, sir. Oh, man, this made me laugh. Fox News has a report up this afternoon. Headline, man sues Dunkin Donuts for $50,000. Claims toilet exploded on him. What are the physics of that? How does a toilet explode? My understanding of gravity suggests that that's not really possible. A Florida man is suing Dunkin Donuts for $50,000, claiming a toilet at one of its locations exploded on him and covered him in feces and urine, according to a court filing obtained by Fox. The plaintiff, Paul Kerouac, claims the incident was traumatic and left him with sustained severe and long-term injuries. The lawsuit was filed in the Ninth Judicial Circuit Wednesday against a Dunkin' franchisee. And it claims a toilet at that Dunkin' Donuts exploded on January 6th of 2022. That would, it's been over 2 years since then, about 2 years, and covered the room. And Kerouac covered the room. How does a toilet manage? What kind of explosives were in the toilet such that the whole room would be covered by this explosion? He was covered with debris, including human feces and urine. He's seeking damages of $50,000. Doesn't seem like a lot relative to a lot of these lawsuits. $50,000. He alleges the franchisee was negligent. He argues store workers were aware the toilet was problematic, as prior incidents with the toilet had occurred. This guy knew all about that toilet, and yet he used it anyway at the Dunkin' Donuts, and it exploded on him. I don't think this is the whole story. I think we're missing some key components. Hopefully it shows up in Discovery. We'll keep track of that story for you. These stories are ridiculous. Remember a couple years back when a guy said he had to use the bathroom, and he said he was going to blow it up, and what he meant was he really needed to use the bathroom. WCNC, Charlotte, North Carolina. This is years ago. 2018. Headline, man accused of threatening to blow up bathroom says he just needed to poop. I have a lot of questions about this Dunkin Donuts story. Some holes in that one. We'll get the answers for you. Hey, coming up on the program, more serious topics, like our border. That exploded. Julio Rosas was there yesterday with those members of Congress. He'll tell us what he saw.